Wonder Tribe, what's up? Today, we're going to be talking about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. I feel like in today's society, that's one of the major things that we struggle with. If we develop the social intelligence, the empathy, the ability to look at it from someone else's perspective that might be different from ours, a lot of problems could be solved. There's so much arguing and bickering, and everybody's just convinced that one side is right and the other is just wrong. But maybe it's majority about perspective. What if we learn to say, you know what, I'm going to take myself out of my position, I'm going to put myself in yours, instead of just automatically assuming that you're wrong and that my way is right. I'm going to see things from your eyes, think the thoughts that you think, and I feel like if we can do more of that, then we would have way less fights and back and forths. But this is something that isn't easy, right? It's much easier said than done. We can't just be like, yeah, I'm going to wake up one day and do it. It's a practice. If I am really upset at a situation, I have to be able to say, I'm going to be objective and not just be using my own personal bias. We all have our own biases that make us feel like we're automatically right. But if everyone thinks that they're automatically right, where does the truth lie? Can we look at things from a third person point of view? Can we step out of our eyes and say, you know what? Maybe I wasn't necessarily wrong in the situation, but I could understand where you're coming from because of the circumstances that you're in. Just food for thought, man. Something that I feel like we could all work on, be better at, myself included. So let's get into a quick little story time. So, quick little story time about myself is that I used to be really stubborn. So, I used to love to debate and argue, and one thing I'd always do was I had to be right. It was my way or the highway. Now, holding myself accountable, I believe that way of thinking is a lower form of social intelligence. And the reason I think that is because it's not necessarily objective. When you put things like that, we're automatically assuming that everybody thinks like us. So if I'm arguing with my friend, and me and him have completely different life upbringings, we're not going to look at life the same way. If I'm just calling people dumb or saying that you guys don't get it, that's just a lack of understanding on my part sometimes. Because what we need to do is we need to say, you know what? Let me put myself in the other person's shoes. Let me try to break down my argument in a really honest way. So if I'm having a debate with somebody and I have a certain stance, let me try to counter-argument my stance authentically so that I can see if I'm really right or not. And maybe that could be what solves a lot of humanity's problems. So many times, we just live in a place where it just has to, we have to be right, whether it be politics, whether it be, taking a certain side on a, controversial topic. I don't know. But it's always like my side is right and your side is wrong. And a lot of emotions get involved in that. It's like we see things from our point of view. But I had to learn. I had to say, you know what? If I'm going to be better with people, if I'm going to become more understanding, more knowledgeable, I have to get out of my own way and understand other people's perspective. So I want to look at your argument, not just through what you're saying, but through your life events. I want to do my best to put myself in that situation, to think the thoughts that the other person is thinking. Then in that way, can I fully understand them and then have a good conversation as to maybe we could come to a middle ground. Maybe we can agree to disagree. But the only true way to fully debate and argue is to be open. You know, so many times I feel like people are arguing with no intention of changing their mind. But we need to develop the capability of understanding and just taking ourselves and looking at things from a third person point of view. So I came up with the monologue inspired by that. So let's get to it. Let's check it out.
You always said you loved me, but you never saw me. I begged you to see me, to understand me, but you never did. So I did what I swore I would never do. And that's hurt you. I had to. Because losing you is easier than losing myself. I'm sorry.
So what I really hope that we could take away from this video is to understand others. You know, maybe we can just learn how to be better with looking at things for what they are. I feel like we try to really control the narrative sometimes. And this could be, you know, whether it be trying to get what you want out of somebody, whether it be a debate, you know, maybe you're trying to, you know, stop arguing with your partner or spouse, and just need to understand that it is what it is, and that so many times that we won't ever be able to change certain things, but we can try our best to understand. So I challenge everybody, if you could just maybe for, you know, a day or two or maybe a little bit of time, just try to really put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I know that could be, you know, very simple to say, but I mean like legitimately, like let's try to really put ourselves in the situation of somebody else. Let's think their thoughts, you know, let's try to talk to them and understand them enough to understand, you know, their past circumstances, so that we're not just completely judging people for disagreeing with us. Because this is how we get stuck, is when we just think that everybody is supposed to be like us, even though they haven't been through anything that's very similar to any of us. So that's my challenge to everyone. If we can just, you know, try to be better, try to be more socially intelligent, try to be more understanding, try to be more of a look at things through a more balanced perspective. And maybe, like I said, that could be the solution to a lot of our life's problems. You know, instead of walking around full of anger, we say, you know what, I might not fully agree with you, but I can understand you, so I'm not going to be upset at you. Or it could even help you understand certain people's perspective. So maybe somebody is lashing out at you, or maybe somebody has a certain amount of standards for you, but you can understand where you're coming from. Like a good analogy I'll have is like an employee versus a business runner, the manager, the owner, whatever. The employee is looking at it for their gain. So if the person running the company is like, hey, I really want you to do this for me, but you know, I need to hold you to this standard. And an employee is like, no, that's not fair. What if the employee were to look at it through the opposite standpoint and say, you know what, he's trying to have me do this because he wants to have an efficiently run business. And then on the opposite side, it's maybe the business owner needs to look at the employee and say, oh, he might not want to do this, so maybe I should give him some incentive and understand why he wouldn't want to do certain tasks at a job. A lot of it is perspective, and a lot of it is stuff that we can work on improving. I think we all need to just understand that growth is, a process. It's not linear. So let's try to learn how to see things from other people's point of view, from other people's perspective. Wonder Tribe, I'll see you soon.